Thanks very much to our panelists for the conversation and for the presentations today. The way we're going to do this is similar to some other ones. We're going to have a bit of a moderated discussion, and then we'll open up for some questions from the group. But I want to start with sort of my three-legged stool question. The idea about how do we combat these issues as an industry. So my three-legged stool is, number one, we could focus on trying to cut their revenues, shorten their profit window, remove the impressions from the reported count so that they're not even shown as a billable impression, et cetera. The second leg is we could focus on increasing their costs. How do we make it cost more money for them to change the economic reward that they're reaping right now? Or possibly on the third side, how do we implement things that increase their risk or their penalties so that there are, there's actual real downside to getting caught? So the question for you guys as the representatives of the industry is to best serve the industry. What are your thoughts on those three stools? Can we fight this fight with a one-legged stool? Do we need to employ all three? What are your thoughts on that? Anyone?
I'll kick things off. So we're not going to win this fight unless we can drive the profits out. Even if we could wave a wand and arrest everyone tomorrow, if the crime is still wildly profitable, there will just be new people who fill in the gap. So there's no question that we need to shrink the size of the pie, and that means arm more advertisers. I'm not sure that we can raise the stakes for the actual cybercriminal operators because attribution on the internet is astonishingly difficult. You can read about this in the news when looking at cyber warfare, where attribution is usually an open question. So we probably can't raise the stakes, especially against foreign nationals who are operating botnets, but we can increase the stakes against the people who are sourcing traffic. So the publishers that are buying a little traffic on the side, and that's about using your buy-side leverage wisely so that you're saying not, go ahead and try to goose the numbers. I don't mind because I'm going to just select the good stuff myself. That doesn't disincentivize anyone to try, which means that they're going to try, and sometimes they'll succeed, which is just free money. So instead, I think that buyers need to leverage themselves up the way that Havas is doing, so that publishers who are caught with their hand in the cookie jar understand what's actually happening, where that money is going, and are strongly disincentivized from even trying anymore. Not like trying to find the source that might work, the better bots that get through, but rather to end the practice altogether.
I think from our side, you have to look at it from a three-legged stool perspective because it's all completely interrelated. A lot of the bots that are created, especially those that are sitting in homes, are actually created by bad ads serving onto good websites, which do come from the demand side. The buys, the ads have to come from somewhere, that are actually putting the code onto the browser that ultimately become the bot. So tackling malware helps reduce the amount of overall infrastructure in place to run bots. All of these things are pretty interrelated, so it's focusing on all of them.
But Chris, are you saying that we can win the fight by simply stopping malware?
Jackson, is this the Spanish Inquisition?
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Our chief weapon is surprise. Fear and surprise. Surprise and fear. Our two weapons are fear and surprise, and ruthless efficiency. Our three weapons are fear, surprise, and ruthless efficiency, and a fanatical devotion to the advertisers. So amongst our weapons, amongst our weaponry, are such elements as fear. I'll come back in.
I wasn't expecting the Spanish Inquisition.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition. Cardinal, read the charges.
You are hereby charged that you did on diverse dates commit heresy against advertisers. You as an industry are accused of heresy, on 3 counts. First, heresy by invalid traffic. Heresy by malware. And heresy by fraud of the worst kind.
Do you officially represent the voice of the advertisers?
Of course not. We are like a, how do you say, a super PAC.
Apologies, Your Excellency, but I think you may have the wrong conference. We're actually here to try to solve those particular elements of heresy.
So I guess you are not expecting a Spanish Inquisition.
No, we were not expecting a Spanish Inquisition.
Bagels, you nitwit! We must find another one.
Well, that was great for Seville, right? But actually, that's a good segue for us in terms of getting back to the three counts of heresy, if you will. Maybe another proverbial three-legged stool. But similarly to the other question, for the panel, can we as an industry just pick and choose one of these issues to fight? Can we just fight invalid traffic? Can we just fight malware? Can we just fight data leakage and make any progress on any of them, or will it require a combined effort?
I don't think we can just fight any of those. As a matter of fact, we've sort of established a policy if somebody wants to come to get accredited for this stuff, you basically have to deal with that entire set that's up there. Now, we're going to live and learn as we go. Maybe we'll make exceptions to that, who knows? But the idea is that this has to be a multi-pronged fight. Related to your question about whether we should follow the money or do other things, one issue is that as this data that might be invalid passes through our systems, very often we add value to it by enriching it, attributing audience characteristics to it, things like that, because we don't know that it's bad at that point. If we learn that it's bad and we use organizations to, and our own measures to identify that, one thing we can do is cut off the attribution at later stages in the process. It's difficult for bad actors to detect, and it depresses the monetary benefit that might inure to the bad actors in the process. So that's one thing that's outlined in our standards.
And I'd add to that, that there's a shared responsibility to making sure that things are dealt with holistically. It is no one player's fault that these things exist. I think that it often falls on the publisher's shoulders because the publisher is the final vector to the consumer where these things happen. So, but I think that ultimately it's a shared cost and a shared responsibility from the brands all the way through to the publishers and the tech ecosystem in between to make sure that filters and checks are put in place and that the cost of maintaining a cleaner, better ecosystem is in place.
Now, Sylvain, you are our representative on this panel from the buy side of the equation. With respect to these two areas that we started with, the concept of can we fight ad fraud through decreasing their revenues, increasing their costs, or can we fight ad fraud alone? Do we have to fight the others? You guys have clearly working with various vendors to help you as a buyer address the problems. How likely do you see it from the buy side as a solvable problem in a reasonable amount of time?
We just need to rally together to fight that. And I think that the first thing for us, all of us, to do is education. We need to make sure that everybody in our industry knows about it, that no one ever answers us again, not in my shop. It's not happened to me. It's happening to everybody. So we have to make sure that we carry that around. The second thing is that we need to have a very great transparency with the data we're using to fight it. We need to have access from any vendor, and this is what we enjoy from White Ops, to the very, very granular data. We need to understand why it's happening, because we need to, on one end, explain to the publisher what's happening in his property, and on the second end, assess the impact on the analytics side, making sure that when we do attribution, we do not attribute to bots, we do not attribute to malware. So the access to the very, very granular data is extremely important.
Well, with our invocation of the Spanish Inquisition, we're running a little bit short on time, but I do have time for one question. I see one right up front here in the audience, if we have a mic. I'll just bring you mine.
I'm wondering, from a consumer standpoint, there are tools out there that say that they can remove spyware, malware. They seem to, basically wipe out your cookies. Are they really effective, and should consumers be using these?
I can certainly comment on that. So I think we typically, so this is from a malware running on a client, so a consumer device could be a phone, a laptop, your PC at home. On average, they see about 1% of the overall malware volume, which obviously is very, very small. That doesn't mean that consumers shouldn't use antivirus or anti-spyware software. They should on their machines. The problem is the bad guys are better than the security companies. They're dropping malware with just enough kind of derivation on a continuous basis that the AV systems aren't able to see it because they're still historically a signature basis type of scanning mechanism. So every time the bad guy changes something, it's lost until there's an update to the AV system. And it's often taking them weeks, months, sometimes years to catch up. So they're pretty ineffective. That said, without it, you are at, at greater risk than you would be without them. That's basically what we see.
Great. Well, I want to thank my panel for being up here today. I hope you guys got as much out of it as I did. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Andreas, who's got a few instructions for us before lunch.